recognize the principle for which it stands. Department 1 is now in session. The Honorable Mark E. Wyndham, Judge, presiding.
Good to see you, everyone. Good morning. Welcome back to Department 1. People versus Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is present with Mr. DeGuerin and Mr. Ray and Mr. Chesnoff. We have Mr. Henderson at council table for the people, along with Mr. Lewin, Bailey, and Miata, and Milius. Our jurors and alternates, again, all are present. We were watching the videotaped conditional examination of Detective Struk, and we're going to resume that. So, Mr. Henderson, when you are ready, you may commence the playing the recording.
Thank you, Your Honor. For the record, this is People 57 at 45 minutes and 19 seconds.
Yes. You did not have any information after Mr. Durst saw you at 4:30 in the afternoon. You conducted your interview with Mr. Durst that you went and met Trooper Hardy in Westchester County.
I have no knowledge of that.
Okay. How long did your interview with Mr. Durst take?
Typically a routine person in a report.
Let me stop you there. I'm not asking you about a typical missing person report. I'm asking you about the Durst case. And if you need to refer to your notebook, which is Exhibit P, I believe it has a number of pages of your interview. So if you need to look at that and judge how long it took you to do the interview with Mr. Durst, please.
If you want me to look at it, I will. But my initial conversation with him, he had going back and explained to me at that point that there was a hiatus in time from when he last saw his wife to the time that he reported it to me. Okay? And during that time, he had explained I guess you could say the way her medical school functions regarding clinics or different things that she would participate in, and would often keep her over some various days. So we had, my recollection was we had covered pretty much that week as to why, in my own mind, I was stimulated by why he's walking in 4 or 5 days after he last sees her. But he had explained to me all these different things about what she does in medical school. So that probably took a little bit longer than a typical missing persons case. Yeah.
Okay. If you'll look at Exhibit P, which is your notebook, and what we call at the bottom of the exhibit, page 2 of 87. It appears to be the first page of your spiral notebook. Is that a fair statement?
And that's what it looks like.
And in fact, at the bottom of it, in slightly different ink, is number 1, circles. Is that, did you number your pages that way?
I don't think so. Could have. Let's see the others up. So yeah, but that's what it looks like. Yeah.
Okay. If we thumb through your spiral notebook, that is the copies, it appears that on page 12 of Exhibit B, you put the number 10 at the bottom, meaning that's the 10th page of your notes of your interview with Mr. Durst. Would you go through that and see if that's the correct statement?
It's an 8. You said another 8?
Well, no, let me, that was kind of an awkward question. You look at the exhibit, the actual pages of your notebook.
I was looking at the numbers, your numbers, so
They get confusing. Okay. Page 2 of the exhibit is numbered at the bottom of your exhibit, page 1. And then if you thumb through the intervening pages, it goes from 1 through your numbers at the bottom of 10.
okay.
Are you able to confirm that those 10 pages of your spiral notebook comprise your notes of your interview with Mr. Durst?
That's correct.
These are the pages of your initial interview with Mr. Durst. Your notes, right?
No, they're not.
Tell me what these are.
This, what we're referring to here is when I went to his home at the penthouse on, I think, Monday, the 8th, and basically that's where I sat with him with another detective and asked him to tell me where he had been that prior week. And this is what reflects in it in his chronology, what he did on that prior week.
Okay. I see now on that page, it says at the top of the page, 2882, interview with the complainant's house. It's on the screen now.
Yes.
Okay, so the 10 pages that are numbered by you in the notebook are of the interview you did at Mr. Durst's home on Riverside Drive?
Correct.
Okay. Let's see what you did in the meantime before you went there on the 8th. So let's go back to Exhibit O. On Friday, February the 5th, we've gone over the things that you did on Friday, February the 5th. Correct?
Right.
You interviewed by telephone Dr. Cook. You interviewed Larry Cohen, fellow student. You interviewed Ann McCormack. You conferred with the New York State Police, with Trooper Horney, on several calls. You notified the Missing Persons Unit, and you did a name check.
Right.
I asked you also about what time you got through. You said it might have been 1 in the morning.
1 or later.
Okay. So you filled the rest of your day from the time you saw Mr. Durst with this case.
Correct.
And that's not ordinary in a missing persons case, is it?
Not really.
In another context, you said that you had some luxury because you were assigned to this case and you didn't catch any new cases for a while. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I remember saying that, just but that particular night, I was working one-handed, it seemed like for most of the night, so I just went at it.
When you say you went at it, that means you dedicated the rest of your evening to it, correct?
Well, I did the best I could.
Let's go to the next page of Exhibit O.
It is now our afternoon recess. Please, you're ordered not to converse with any other witness until you complete your testimony. Order recess. Court started session, People versus Law. Mr. Durst is present with counsel. People represented. Jury meeting continued. I'll remind you, you are under oath. Next, proceed with your examination.
Detective Struk, I want to turn the page on the chronology that's on the screen now and go to the next day, which is February the 6th. That would have been a Saturday.
I believe so.
What was your ordinary work schedule back then?
Our charge consisted of 241 shifts, and then 2 day duties. So I'm guessing it was either a day duty. There would have been no more. I could see it at times.
Well, my question wasn't very well. Were you working on Fridays and Saturdays? Were you working on Saturdays back then?
I believe I was still in a regular chart, so I probably would have worked that Saturday.
Okay,
Normal schedule, if that's what you mean.
All right, well, your chronology shows 4 entries for Saturday, February the 6th on the Durst case, correct?
Yes.
Would you have used this only for the Durst case, this chronology? Or would you put other cases you were working on?
Only what pertains to the Durst matter, but we go in that chronology.
All right, good.
I could have worked on other cases, but that was exclusive to this.
I think we established before lunch that once you were assigned to the Durst case, you were able to work on that full-time without distractions of new cases coming in. Is that right?
At some point, yes.
Do you know whether it was at this point yet, on February 2nd?
No. I think the way you're going as to whether or not I was removed from the regular defendant chart. And that came at some point later on.
Okay. At any rate, on Saturday, February the 6th, you interviewed Kathie's brother. You had another interview with the state troopers. You interviewed Roberta Najami, and you received a call from Mr. Durst, according to this.
That's according to the chronology.
Who was Gilberta Najami? What was your understanding of who she was?
She was a friend of Kathie Durst.
All right. Did there come a time when her interference with the case, if I could put it that way, became something troublesome to you?
Let me say she was very aggressive in her demands of what the police department should do.
Did you learn that she had broken into the South Salem house, for instance?
I understand she did make an entry.
Now, as a police officer, you know that you cannot get a citizen to go do something illegal for you, can you?
No.
You couldn't send a citizen to make a search that you couldn't do yourself, could you?
That's correct.
And you knew that if you were to do a search, you would have to do it by either consent, informed consent, or by a search warrant.
Correct.
But your information was that Mr. Durst had consented to the party, the state troopers, searching the South Salem house.
Say that again, sir?
Was it your information that Mr. Durst had consented, invited Trooper Harney and the other trooper to look through the South Salem house?
No, that's not correct.
What was your information about that?
My recollection is that Ms. McJaney and the trooper either got there at the same time or at some point conducted this walkthrough together, or she called him, or anyway, they had entered the premises. And my concern was that if somebody is missing, it's the welfare of a person, whether or not that person could be laying there on the floor dying, or if it needed some sort of medical care. So the fact that they went into the premises, she was not there, they did not see anything that would suggest foul play, I was satisfied with that. How they let him in, could care less.
Let's turn to the next page of your chronology. And you have it in front of you in that book, if you would rather use that. So you should look it up on the screen. It starts off with an entry for February 7th, which would have been
What letter code? Oh,
yes, sir.
we're still on the 6th, or we moving to the
We're going to 7 at the top of the page, and then it goes quickly to the 8th. You got it?
Yeah, I'm not that one.
Okay. It indicates that you interviewed Mary Hughes, who was Kathie's sister.
Correct.
Hughes being her married name.
Correct.
Did you come to learn that she was a close friend with a woman named Geraldine McInerney?
Yes.
Now, in the friends of Kathie that played a part in the investigation, what was your observation about whether Geraldine McInerney and Mary Hughes were kind of a team of two, and Gilberta Najami and some of her friends were a separate team?
I think that's fair to say, yes.
Okay. And did you feel that at times you were receiving some interference from the Mary Hughes, Geraldine McInerney team?
Well, they had their view as to what possibly had happened to Kathie, and they were aggressive in their request of our investigation.
When I asked you if in your investigation you heard something from a witness or you talked to a witness who told you something, it's for the purpose of showing what you did, what your state of mind as an investigator was. And so I asked you that again about, did you hear, in fact, from either Geraldine McInerney or Kathie Durst's sister, that they had entered Durst's apartment without...
I don't recall that.
Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. Okay, let's go over some other things that you developed in your investigation to show what you did. Later down on the page that we're on right now, you talk about an interview you had with Dr. Cooperman.
Yes.
And you conducted that interview?
Yes.
Did you speak on the phone or speak to him in person?
My recollection, he had, I think somebody else in the team had spoken to him first, and then I did it again. That's what I think I recall. I believe it was done twice, and I think I did it separately.
And you see it out to the right on your chronology there, see DD5 of 212.
Yes, I see
Does
that.
that mean that in your typewritten report, there should be a report of that interview with Dr. Cooper?
Should be.
Let's flip to Exhibit S, page 20. It's on the screen if you're having difficulty finding it.
Okay.
Is that your handwriting?
Basically, yes.
Would you read that entry, please, sir, out loud?
Well, it's got a heading, interview, Associate Dean for Education, Al Kuberman, and apparently that's his phone number. And it said last Monday, at sometime between 9 and 11 a.m. Sounded distressed, distraught. Problems with clerkship and neurology. Having difficulty making it up. Headaches, diarrhea. Like I said, it's kind of blurry, but anyway, it says.
Is that?
Yeah, okay, you're right. It's cramps. Does not know where she called from. Disturbed about having to make up time others don't have to. History of mental distress. And then I put down who it was, Dr. No. And then it says Dr. David Kaufman of Montefiore Hospital, neurology and.
Now, I'd like to jump forward to page 53 of the same exhibit. That's Exhibit S, page 53. It's on the screen now. Is this the typewritten version of the notes you just read into the record?
Yes.
This appears to be actually two interviews of Dr. Cooperman. A re-interview is in paragraph 2. The information that you gave us that was handwritten note then appears in paragraph 1. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's one and the same, I think.
Pause video.
I think it's,
Yes.
We've now seen 3 exhibits that have been read into the record, and I move to admit them at this point.
I'll hear you.
Your Honor, we've already had this
This
discussion.
is what we discussed this morning. So your motion's denied.
And so when do you want me to make that motion?
You can make it at the conclusion of the video.
Your Honor, we'll stipulate that there's a standing objection to the court's prior ruling.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, just to clarify, the witness testified and it said that it's on the screen, which means it would have been seen on the screen. And we're just reminding the court respectfully that it's not being shown now.
It's been moved. I'm sorry. It was read into the record.
Okay.
The jurors heard the words. That is sufficient at this time. There are maybe other problems with the document that I'll address at the appropriate time. The content has been testified to. The jurors heard that testimony. You may continue the video.
depicts or is a typewritten version of the thing that I had just read. And when the term re-interview may have been my term at the time for who had spoken to him originally.
Okay. But it has the additional information that the length of the conversation was long enough to have been interrupted by a signal on the phone if it had been from a payphone.
It could have been, but I don't remember that being part of anything that I included in here.
Look at paragraph 2 of the typewritten report.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't remember that until I just reread it.
That's why we've got it here, to help. I mean, this is many years ago when you did this. So now, do you recall that you inquired, you wanted to know, I suppose, that whether this was from a payphone or not?
Well, apparently it came out in the conversation.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned Dr. David Kaufman in your handwritten notes. They're in Exhibit S. Let's go to page 28 of Exhibit S. The date is difficult to read on this copy, but is this your typewritten version of your interview of David Kaufman, Dr. David Kaufman, about Ms. Durst?
Yeah, certainly
Could you
should.
read that in the record, please?
The subject title states, interview with Dr. David Kaufman, Montefiore Hospital, telephone number 920-4730, and he was the course director. States Kathie Durst missed many classes dating back approximately a year and a half. Thinks it was about time her marriage was starting to fail. Gave absurd excuses for her absences, such as car broke down 2 to 3 days, also missed an entire week. Failed at July 1981 cycle clerkship in neurology. Was under stress and was disturbed regarding having to repeat missed classes.
Was that Dr. Kaufman's word, absurd excuses?
I would assume, yeah.
Now, was it important to you to know what was going on in her life in order to assess what may have happened, whether she was voluntarily running off or what was going on?
Well, everything is important, and it certainly seemed at that point that it was indicated that their marriage wasn't doing too well.
Did you get information about a person by the name of Mike Burns?
That sounds familiar, yes.
And what was your information about Mr. Burns, and where did you get it?
Perhaps from her family and friends, the people that, that were trying to assist us in this process. I do remember the name of Burns.
Well, did you hear from Jim McCormack, the brother of Kathie, that she had a co-parent?
Like I say, Mr. DeGuerin, I recall hearing from one or more people that she did occasionally dabble with that. But to tell you specifically who and when, here right now, I cannot.
Okay, let me see if I can refresh your recollection. Turn to page 21 of Exhibit S. It's an entry that was made on February the 6th. It's an entry about an interview you had with Jim McCormack, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the writing says Kathie has cohabit was told by Geraldine and Gilbert. Is that what you heard from Jim McCormack? And, by the way, from Geraldine and from Gilbert?
So, as I stated, I recall hearing it, but this brings me to when and by whom.
So, sure. Fair enough. It was a long time ago, and that's why we've got these records here, so you can look at them and see if you do remember. You remember that now, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So now, did you interview Michael Burns on February the 8th, 2 days later?
I believe I did speak to this guy.
We're slipping back and forth to different.
What is it now?
Okay, now we're on the chronology for February the 8th. It's on, I'm sorry. February 8th, 1850, that would be 6:50 p.m.
Correct.
Interviewed Michael Burns at the police station.
Correct.
Took a statement.
Correct.
Now turn to page 29 of Exhibit S. This is your interview with Michael Burns that you referenced in your chronology, right?
Yes.
Was it your information that she had failed a second in neurology specifically earlier in the year and was having difficulty making it up?
Are you asking me am I aware that she was having trouble existence at that time?
At that time, were you made aware of that, whether it was true or not? Were you made aware that she had failed a second and was having difficulty making it up?
Yes.
Like she had complained to Dr. Cooperman about that, hadn't she? According to Dr. Cooperman.
Correct.
All right. Well, let's look at some of the other things that you did. Let's jump ahead on your chronology. Exhibit O, page 11. It's on the screen for you. There's an entry for February the 24th. It says that you interviewed Susan Berman. Now, and you have a telephone number. That is another person from whom you got information, whether it was true or not, that Kathie had cocaine habits, correct?
I'm sorry, what do you mean another person? You talking about how being the other person?
Being yet another person. You'd already heard it from Kathie's brother, you heard it from Geraldine McInerney, you heard it from Gilbert and John.
Yeah, and she includes clothes and she goes on to say other things. I don't know if you want me to get into it.
Okay. Back to the previous page, page 13 of Exhibit O. The third entry from the bottom for March the 8th. Geraldine McInerney and Mary Hughes at 20 PD. That's the 20th Precinct Detective Unit, right?
Correct.
And state they found Kathie's jewelry.
That's what it says.
All right, I want to ask you about the significance of that. Did you have information from, among others, Mr. Durst himself, that Kathie usually wore a set of diamond earrings?
I vaguely recall something like that.
Okay. This entry indicates that Mary Hughes and Geraldine McInerney told you that they found her jewelry. Do you recall that now?
Oh, yeah, I see it, I memorialized it in the chronology, whether it was earrings or whatever, I don't know at this point. I mean, it doesn't state that. But it says jewelry.
Did you question Geraldine McInerney and Mary Hughes about how they gained access to the Riverside Drive apartment, if that's where it was, where they found Kathie's jewelry?
I don't recall how they came about it, or whether Mary had a key or whatever. I don't remember the specifics of that.
Let me refer you to page 53 of your spiral notebook. It's Exhibit P. 53 is our number. And there's an entry at the top, March the 8th of '82, that seems to coincide with your chronology entry about Geraldine McInerney and Mary Hughes being at the precinct. Does it?
Yeah. Let me read this, please. It said they went to Bob's apartment. It seems as though Bob is there.
Where do you get that Bob was there when they went there?
States that Bob Durst called Mary late last night.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, it's
Why don't you just read the whole entry into the record?
1300 hours, Geraldine and Mary Hughes at 20 PDU. State that Bob Durst called Mary last night, late last night. Stated that police are mad because he had not gone through her personal tapes. Mary and Geraldine went to Bob's apartment. During this time, the jewelry that Kathie usually wore was observed in Kathie's drawer. Also her ring, her wedding ring. Also other jewelry. State Bob may go to Florida.
Florida, I believe it says. Yeah. Well, let's parse that just a little bit.
Okay.
Geraldine and Mary tell you that the police are mad because he had not gone through her personal papers. Is that true?
That sounds I don't recall that, but it doesn't sound. Why would I'm not gonna be mad at a complainant.
Doesn't sound like it, does it?
No, it's,
Okay. Was that some indication that you weren't getting good information from Geraldine and Mary?
well, I don't know if I would say that it was not good information, but I know that Mary was under a hell of a lot of strain and duress, and they would bombard me with, all of us in the team, with a lot of their thoughts and suggestions and hopes that we could resolve this quickly. And so I didn't take it upon myself to break down what they thought was accurate, or what suggestions that they were trying to impart upon me. But I know what people tell me. That's what you say.
Okay. And then the next thing, though, is that Mary and Geraldine went to Bob's apartment. During this time, the jewelry that Kathie usually wore was observed in Kathie's drawer. Let's parse that for a moment. If Kathie had left South Salem wearing her jewelry, wedding ring, diamond earring, and come into Manhattan, and now in Manhattan, Geraldine and Mary find her jewelry, her wedding ring, and her diamonds, that's even more indication that she made it into Manhattan, isn't it?
That's what that appears to be, yes.
Now, your guess is as good as mine as to whether Kathie had a habit of taking the wedding ring off at night and leaving it where she was, or taking her earrings off. But it sounds like that the things that she usually wore were in the apartment in Manhattan, right? That's what they're reporting to.
Yes.
If you look at the next entry, you have another conversation with Geraldine and McInerney, and Geraldine, well, just another conversation with Geraldine later that day. Same day, March the 8th, right? In which Geraldine, let's just read it into the record, March 8, 82. Return call to Geraldine McInerney states that she and Mary Hughes called Bob Durst. He then stated, hey, where's the bank records? Cancel checks, etc. from bank statement. She then, Mary, told him, was he aware that Kathie's jewelry was in her drawer? He then stated, and now go to the next page. I told everyone that weeks ago. There was a pause first, stated, God damn it, then I told everyone that weeks ago. That's, you're reporting there on what Geraldine McInerney reported to you, right?
Yes.
Now, at the time, did you assume that Geraldine and Mary had entered Bob Durst's apartment without his consent?
That's what this was.
And in fact, did you have a conversation with Geraldine McInerney and tell her, if you can't do that, get out of there?
I'll rely on what I think is my ability to guide people, right? If you're a burglar, get the hell out, but don't do it. I mean, even though she was Kathie's sister, and I understand her being distraught to go in there, I would tell her that maybe that was not proper. I would assume I would have told him that.
I'm asking you whether you have a recollection of it now or not.
I mean, I don't mean that officially, but I would think that I should have said that to her. I mean,
You, as a detective, would have had to either get consent or a search warrant.
well, I would have told him, look, anything that you glean from an illegal entry wouldn't even be helpful because it was obtained under wrongful conditions. So
Do you have a recollection of having such a conversation?
I don't think I know.
That's, it's time for our afternoon recess.
This is going to be a question that I have to lead into a little bit, so please bear with me. We have before you, have supplied you with, for your reference, your own handwritten chronology that you did at the time. And it shows many entries over a period of time, the last entry being in May of 1984. We also have, and we've provided for you, for your review, your spiral notebook, which is our Exhibit P.
Correct.
It is filled to the last page with notes of what you did, who you interviewed, and so forth.
Yes.
And we have supplied for your review the typewritten reports, our Exhibit S. We've also supplied for your review, although you haven't had time to look at it, and probably remember it pretty well, the 2 interviews that you did with the makers of the Jinx. And we supplied for your review, if it became important, the telephone records, hundreds of pages of telephone records that you obtained during this investigation. So I want to ask you, did you do your best to solve this mystery back in 81, 82, 83?
Absolutely. From my professional and personal, I feel like we did whatever we could with what we were presented with what direction we had. I had held this case in court, where I took a lot of it home with me that I had made copies of, because I knew that if it wasn't solved over the years, hopefully it would remain a cold case, and then somebody would resurrect it along the way. But I am professionally comfortable with what we had done at the time before the case got really cold. Yeah.
This may be opening a wound, but in the petition that we supplied to you, I don't know whether you read it or not, but it's the matter that was brought by the Abrams law firm, and I understand Mr. Abrams is here in the courtroom. They insult you, don't they?
It appears to be that, yes.
You think that's fair?
No. Until you walk in my shoes, don't spit in my face. So it's
one of the sections of that petition is titled New York PD's Failure to Investigate the Murder of Kathie. You feel like NYPD failed to investigate Kathie's disappearance?
if this wasn't such a serious topic, I would laugh.
quotes Janine Pirro. You aware of that?
I've heard the name.
How do you feel about Janine Pirro?
I'd be admonished if I told you what I thought.
Actually, this judge has heard a lot worse. But me.
I have to take the higher. This is something. So, about camera over.
Camera whore.
Yeah.
In their lawsuit, they quote her as saying, and I'm going to ask you what you think about the statement. Give you your opportunity to comment. First thing they quote her as saying is, the investigation was either unethical, corrupt, or incompetent, maybe all three. What's your comment?
Look at the source.
Second quote, either a real cop investigated a real crime and blew it, or someone above him pulled the plug on it and didn't care that a real woman was gone.
It's ridiculous.
Gilberti and company, this is another quote, were providing the NYPD with hard evidence of Robert's suspicious activities in the aftermath of his wife's disappearance. They ignored it. The question is why? Your comment?
What hard evidence? What crime scene? What dead body? All they were throwing was suggestions, and I know from their heart they had their views as to what they thought took place. But that's a major step away from what is reality and what is something that we in a police agency are able to investigate within the guidelines and procedures that are set forth by the courts. It's easy to snap your finger and say, well, they should have done and whatever, whatnot. I'm comfortable with what we did.
The next quotation. I was actually stunned and horrified by Struk's work on the case. Struk seemed determined to ignore vital evidence. I was convinced he had marching orders or was so prejudiced against women that he didn't give a damn that someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's friends was missing. End quote. Keep in mind, this is Abrams quoting Janine Pirro. Your comment?
I don't want to laugh in court. I just think it's absurd.
Two more and I'll be through with this.
I've had it.
Another quote, unlike most of the cold cases I'd investigated so far, though, I was stunned by how little we had to work with. From the initial investigation, a murder investigation in my county would produce a full box, a stack of files as heavy and thick as a few phone books. The NYPD box on Kathie was light, the file itself amazingly narrow.
And who's this? Pirro?
The media whore, Janine Pirro, as you call it.
The
Camera whore.
I'm trying to be kind.
Why?
Because I'm a gentleman. When her staff stepped into our case, they came down here on all sorts of information from the informant that would lead to their investigation, so to say. And that was it. There was no case. I'm not going to, believe me, I'm not going to sit here and say that their case began because of what I helped them with, but I sure as hell did. I gave them whatever I had I memorialized along the way years later. After the case had been resurrected, I members of my own former detective squad. And I tried to help, just like anybody and everybody, whether people were writing books or chases or what the hell not. I wanted to help. So to say that it was a static situation and nobody gave a damn, that's an insult.
And the final quote from Judge Janine, quote, that an NYPD detective and a lieutenant could do so little and draw such conclusions based on information provided by Robert Durst's spokesperson and employees of the Durst was reflective of a society that felt women were disposable. Your comment?
Robert Durst's spokesman,
Were you relying on Robert Durst's spokesperson for your investigation?
No.
In fact, did you do an independent investigation as we just touched the highlights of?
That's correct.
Is this a person portray a judge on television now? Is that it?
Yes, to my knowledge, Judge, she's never been a judge. She pretends to be a judge. She was
a judge. She's on Fox News. She's channeling Donald Trump regularly.
She has a TV show that goes on.
Okay, just a little bit clear about it. The reference for the Garrett's records, it's judge, so, all right.
In your career, how many murders of women have you investigated? Do you know?
Well, I was assigned to a fairly slow homicide group for 4 or 5 years. And we would do a couple hundred a year, our team. So, do the numbers. 500, 600, 700 murders. I'm sure a good portion of them were females.
You need break.
Do I need a break? I want to go home.
Okay, that's all right, then, people, you may cross-examine.
Your Honor, we've reached the conclusion of the first day of testimony. I can start the second day of testimony.
Yes, we'll take our break at 10:30. I think it's a little early to take our break. Anyone need a break now? No, let's keep going, and we'll take our break at the ordinary time.
Welcome back, Detective. You remain under oath. Yes, and you may continue with, you may begin your cross-examination of
Detective, if you can, and part of this is my fault. I've got hearing aids. For some reason, yesterday, it was really hard for me to understand some of your testimony when I checked with some.
One moment, Your Honor.
welcome back, Detective. You remain under oath. Welcome back, Detective. You remain under oath. Yes, and you may continue with, you may begin your cross-examination of
Detective, if you can, and part of this is my fault. I've got hearing aids. For some reason, yesterday, it was really hard for me to understand some of your testimony when I checked with some of the other lawyers. Sometimes, I don't know if you're too close or you're not opening your mouth all the way, but if you can really make an effort to enunciate so I can understand what you're saying.
My wife could blame the same thing.
Okay, well, then, no, this her. Okay, Detective, can you tell me, you indicated yesterday that you went to homicide in approximately 1995, is that correct? 1979.
Yes, that's correct, around that time.
Can you tell me what kind of training did you have specifically related to homicide before you went?
Everybody that was assigned to the homicide squad would then go to a homicide course which I think was about a week or two, and it covered everything from the medical examiner and the different crime scene tactics and retrieval of trace material or any kind of evidence that a homicide investigator would come across. And
do you remember previously relating back on January 26, 2015, that your memory was you went to a week-long homicide course?
as I said, it could be a week or 2 weeks.
And during that course, were you instructed, did you have any specific training on handling no-body homicide cases?
I don't specifically recall that issue.
How many homicide cases have you personally been the lead detective on during your career in New York City?
As the lead,
The lead, yes.
I guess somewhere between 75 and 100.
And can you tell me how many of those were no-body homicide cases?
I don't think any of them.
So this was your first no-body homicide, is that correct?
I believe so.
Is it also fair to say that the 2-0, that's where you were working at the time this happened, right?
At the time, yes.
The 2-0 was a slower precinct in terms of homicides.
Yes.
And in fact, if you were looking to have a kind of an easier gig in homicide, would you agree it'd be pretty hard to beat the 2-0?
By the time I retired, the 2-0 became a country club. When I first went there, we were a pretty busy shop. And when I was in a homicide squad, we happened to be using the same building. So when I was reassigned out of the homicide squad, when they technically disbanded the homicide squad, and we all then went to Barney Miller squad, is what I call, I then stayed in the same building. So I was familiar with the activity, past and present within the 2-0.
And it's fair to say that by 1982, the 2-0 was, in terms of homicide, more of a country club.
That would be fair to say, yes.
Now, you indicated that you came to homicide roughly in 75. When did you leave homicide?
79 or 80.
And can you tell me, when you left homicide, was that voluntary on your part?
Yes, like I explained yesterday, they disbanded the homicide units that were, you hear me? They had disbanded the structure, the present structure of the homicide units at that point, and we were then given options to go either to task force units or to pick a squad to go to and then function.
Is it fair to say that there were other people who were in homicide that when it disbanded, they went into a homicide section?
Yes, they chose to go to the task force, which then functioned out of its central location, and they would basically live out of the trunks of their car, which I didn't want to do anymore.
So is it fair to say that once you left homicide, you were looking for a less stressful, less kind of active gig, for lack of a better term?
Well, that certainly helped, but like I said, I wanted to be more stable in where I worked every day, rather than bounce all over the boroughs or, from one end of the city to the other.
When you ended up going originally, you left homicide, you went to the 2-0. What kind of cases did you handle there?
Burglaries, robberies, it's all the general type investigations. And if a homicide came in, I would assist with it, or in many cases I'd get familiar with it because I did have some background.
And so at the time that Bob Durst walks in the door on February 5th of 1982, you're basically a detective who's working much anything that comes in the door is 2-0, right?
That's correct.
At the time, February 5th, 1982, how many active homicides were you working, if you know?
I don't know if it had any active at that point.
And is it fair to say that the last homicide?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I had finished up a big homicide just before that, from 1980, that carried over for, I guess, a year and a half into trial, which happened in the Opera House.
So, 1982, the last case that you had worked prior to the Durst case, last homicide case, was this Opera case, correct?
I believe so.
Do you remember if you had been the lead on any other homicides near the time of the Opera case?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. Was I the lead on any other cases prior to the Met case?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure I had several.
So you mentioned that you think you were the lead on probably 75 homicide cases, is that right?
During the homicide squad, yes.
And that would have been during a period of roughly, is that 2 years, 3 years, what is it, 4 years?
4 years, 4 or 5 years, yeah.
So you came in 75, when did you end up,
I think the latter part of 79, I think, they disbanded.
Will you wait until the questions?
Okay. So,
and if you can remember, Detective, on the cases you were the lead, you remember about what percent did you solve?
of the ones that I was the
When you
lead,
were the lead, yes.
our office used to be ranked somewhere between 50 and 75% as a group. What my percentage was, I can't tell you. I don't recall.
You would think somewhere you would guess then between 50 and 75%.
I would think so.
And is it fair to say that after this case, you didn't handle any homicides for very long, is that right?
Correct.
You, at some point in time, got involved with kind of media stuff, TV, technical advising, is that right?
Correct.
When did that start?
I think a few years after I retired.
So you didn't do any of that while you were still working?
No.
And what kind of stuff did you do? Meaning within the technical advising?
You mean for a TV show?
Yeah, whatever you did, I'll just call it media stuff. What did you do?
Well, I provided my my thoughts on scripts as to what was authentic, what would be credible. That was the concept of the particular show that I had worked with.
And did you work for one particular show?
I did several things, but the one I worked with the most was one particular show, which I've done on for many years.
And what show was that?
Law and Order.
And what did you do for Law and Order?
Exactly, as a technical advisor.
Did Law and Order,
Police matters, technical consultant, technical advisor.
did you ever assist on a Law and Order episode in any way based on this case?
No, I don't think so. No.
Now, I want to talk for a moment. You went through yesterday, you talked about your report, your DD5, your notebook, and your chrono. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes, sir.
And is it fair to say that you had a chance to go through, you saw the notebook that was up yesterday, you recognized your handwriting, correct?
Yes.
And the way you would do it, it was sequential in that it's handwriting, so you're going, you write, and then the next thing happens, you write again, etc. Is that correct?
Yes.
So then that would mean that for the most part, at least the entries that you're making are chronological in terms of when you're making. And unless there's some information that comes up later, your kind of order of the information itself is going to be chronological. Is that right?
Correct.
Now, yesterday, you were asked to go through, and you were asked to read certain statements and certain notes that you had. Do you recall that by Mr. DeGuerin?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that Mr. DeGuerin did not generally have you read the entire statement of whatever it was you were reading?
I guess that would be fair to say, yeah.
Is it fair to say that he basically, he picked parts for you to read, is that correct?
Yes.
You were aware of the information reports that you read yesterday from your notebook, from your chrono, from your DD5s. Those were all reports you originally wrote or that you were a part of, written by someone on your team, is that correct?
Yes.
And having reviewed those reports, Detective Struk, would you agree that there are statements within those reports, there's information within those reports, that could certainly be viewed by somebody as incriminating towards Mr. Durst? Is that correct?
Correct.
And would you agree that Mr. DeGuerin omitted many of those parts when he had you read? Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Did that seem strange to you when you were up there?
I'm doing the best I can, and I answer. I mean, what is strange, what he chose to omit, you're bringing it out now.
Okay. And you testified, I would assume, many, many times, correct?
Yes.
How many times do you think you testified in court?
Over 20 years, quite a few times.
Probably over 20 years, probably more than 100, right?
Probably, yeah.
And when you retired, did you also do private investigator work?
Yes.
And can you describe what you did in terms of that? Who you worked for, what you did?
Developed cases for counsel. I also had corporate clients that I would institute investigations on, and just general PI stuff.
Was it common for you to have as clients criminal defense attorneys?
Yes.
And have you learned that as a witness being called in, that you answer the questions that you're asked?
Yes.
And you don't add things, even if you think, hey, I might want to add that. You listen to the question and you answer what you're asked.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's just comes from my police background as well. Is to try to be accurate and concise and not black line.
If we've already had a stipulation yesterday that goes to your reports, and it goes to your notebook, and it goes to your chronicle, regarding the foundation for what we call past recollection recording. And that simply means, and I'm just going to very briefly, we have a stipulation, I just want this on record. The notes that you took and the reports that you wrote, those notes and reports were made at or near the time that you did whatever work generated the notes and reports. Is that correct?
For the most part, yes.
And were those notes and reports, were those made pursuant to your responsibilities as a New York City police detective?
Oh, yes.
And was it important to you to be as accurate as possible in those reports?
Yes.
And in terms of having looked at those reports, for the most part, did they appear to you to be complete and accurate as to at least what you were told or what you did?
Yes.
Fair to say, you can never, as a detective, you can't really vouch for the information that you're being given, right?
That's correct.
So what you can do is somebody tells you X, Y, Z, and you write it down, right?
Yes.
Does that make it true?
No.
Oftentimes, do witnesses tell you things that are not true?
Yes.
as you sit here today, again, is it fair to say that you do not have a full and complete memory of all of the interviews that you did with these individuals going on 35 years ago? Actually, more than 35 years ago.
No.
Yeah, and also as you sit here today, I assume there are some things about this case that you have a clear memory of, and other things that much hazier. Is that fair too?
Yes.
All right. I want to ask you, you were asked about your original contact with Bob Durst. Do you remember being asked about that by Mrs. Sharon?
Yes.
And is it fair to say you have a pretty clear memory of that because it was unusual?
Yes.
And you indicated before that Mr. Durst walked in with a dog, and then he had a magazine. Is that right?
I didn't say that. I don't recall a magazine. I know all the time people have said to me, do I remember a magazine? Or that supposedly he had uttered a magazine to me. I don't remember ever making any testimony from a magazine.
Can you play MS-001, please? Mark with people's next in order. 6. Should the transcript be PD or?
Hey, people 68. And that's from the transcript for counsel, page 9.
Wait a minute, is this where the magazine was supposedly?
Just listen to the question and
Oh,
the
okay.
video, and you'll see it.
I'll ask you after.
All right.
This is going to be page 9, lines 2 through 16, LADA page 154705. May 27, 2011 interview with Jarecki and Struk.
Well, even my first meeting with him, when he walks into the detective squad, I was there by myself, and he came in the door, and he swung open this little gate that we would try to just keep people back, and he had this dog with him, and a magazine, some magazine, which he later on tries to impress me that the stature of his family, his father. He sits down next to my desk in the middle of the squad room, and he's telling me about his wife was missing. He allows his distraught husband who allows a 5-day hiatus from the time she's missing to coming in reporting it to me. And I won't say he was really cavalier, but it was like he was in a deli ordering a hero sandwich. No emotion.
All right, Mr. Liu, you may ask the question.
The question.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our mid-morning recess. We'll return at 10:45. Do not talk about the case or any of the people or any subject involved in it with anyone, including the other jurors. Do not make up your mind about the verdict or any issue until after you've discussed the case with the other jurors during deliberations. See you at 10:45.